Everybody gets stuck in life sometimes. Everyone has periods of time where they cannot really move forward or make any meaningful progress towards their long-term goals. Some of us experience these stuck periods relatively infrequently and for relatively short periods of time. Some of us spend large chunks of our life, maybe even the majority of our life, in this stuck phase. But all humans hit this wall sometimes. Everybody experiences this to a degree. And I want to make sure that you don't let anyone else tell you otherwise, including your own mind, by the way, which of course is almost always our harshest critic, if we're being honest. But there's so much pressure to just be constantly growing, constantly evolving, constantly moving forward. And it's great to do those things when you can. I'm a huge fan of that myself. But it's also important to know when you can't, because there's certain phases of life that you're going to hit where it is simply not feasible to be making meaningful progress towards those big picture long-term goals. And really what it comes down to at the end of the day is resource availability. There are a lot of ways I can make this point to you today, because what I'm hoping you're going to come away from this video with is compassion and empathy and understanding for yourself and how to apply the compassion and empathy and understanding that you need to yourself during what I call your dormant periods. I could review a bunch of psychological literature with you. I think that would be the least exciting way to make my point to you. So instead, I'm going to talk to you about grass and trees today. And that might sound really goofy, but here's the thing. I've learned as both a clinical psychologist and as someone who spends a lot of time in nature and in the outdoors, that there are so many fundamental truths of mental health and what we need as living beings and how we work on the inside that on a very basic core level are reflected in the design of the natural world. Truths about ourselves that we can see in plants and in animals. And when I see those truths, it helps me realize, okay, this isn't just me. Like, this isn't just me being a weirdo. This is an actual limitation that all living things face sometimes. So 2 stories I'm going to tell you, then we're going to kind of review the fundamental principles here. There is a maple tree in our backyard. And this year I noticed, probably in around May, that this particular maple tree still didn't have any leaves. And I thought that was unusual because maples typically get leaves really early in the year. And we have 2 other maple trees in our yard that had full leaves already. So I was like, what, did this tree die? Like, what's going on with this tree? So I'm going out, kind of, I snap one of the really small branches to look inside, and inside is green. And if the wood is green inside, that means the tree is still living. So I'm like, this tree is alive. It doesn't appear to be lacking anything that I can see visibly. You know, it's kind of by itself, so it's not like it's getting shaded out or crowded out by a bunch of bigger trees. It's been a very wet spring, so we've had tons of rain. Like, what is going on with this tree? Does it have a disease or something? And I do a little research, and I learned that maple trees are particularly vulnerable to having their leaves basically like unable to, is it blossom? I don't know tree terminology super well. Their leaves don't show up if you have a really, really warm period in the winter or in the early spring followed by a frost. Because what happens is the leaves start to bud and then the frost kills them off, and the tree can't produce more buds that year because the season in which it can do that, it's past. Like, its moment is gone for that year. And we did, in fact, at least here in the Midwest, we had a couple weeks in, I think it was February, of like 60-degree and sunny weather. It was felt like spring, and then we had a frost. So I'm sure that's what happened to this maple tree. And so the way I interpret that, the application I see from that experience to us as humans, is that this tree experienced a trauma. Like, maybe not I don't know if, trees probably don't experience like a psychological trauma, but it was, I assume, growing well and thriving under a certain set of conditions. And then an unanticipated and unexpected circumstance happened that stopped this tree's growth dead in its tracks. I'm sure if I could like look inside the tree, you could see where the buds started to grow and then froze off and just died and broke. And this tree now for this year is not going to have a growing season. It's going to have a year of dormancy. And again, what I want to emphasize to you here is, other than the fact that it clearly does not have leaves, this tree looks fine from the outside. There doesn't appear to be anything wrong with it. And again, we have other maple trees in the same yard that dealt with the same winter and then the same warm week followed by a frost, and they are fine. So to me, as an outsider who doesn't know exactly what this tree has experienced, it seems like this tree should have leaves. And it seems like something must be wrong if this tree doesn't have leaves. But although I did not see this happen, having read up on what happens to trees under the conditions that we had this year, I am almost completely sure that this tree's growing period was halted by an invisible trauma, something that no one would be able to know by looking at it, something you could only see if you could look beneath the surface into this tree. And I found myself thinking, that happens to us too, doesn't it? We sometimes are on a really good path or a really good trajectory in life, and things are looking up and we're growing and we're thriving. And then something happens that we had no idea was coming. And it might even be something that other people don't know about. It might be something that happened to other people and they seem to bounce right back from it and keep going. And we're like, well, what's wrong with me? Why am I not able to handle this thing that my friends and my family members, like they went through the same thing? Why am I the only one not growing? And I don't know the exact answer to that in your life, but think about the trees. Like this tree is not mentally fragile. It can't be. It doesn't have a brain. This tree didn't do anything wrong. But this tree, for whatever reason, experienced the same circumstances differently and more problematically. I don't know if that's a real word, than our other maple trees. It only stopped the growing season for one tree. That demonstrates to me that the same event can hit us differently. And this happens all the time. I mean, most obvious example of this, we discovered PTSD in veterans returning from war. But you'd have multiple people in the same theater battle, generally seeing and experiencing the same things. Not all of them get PTSD. Some do, some don't. There are individual differences in how hard things hit us. And so don't think that you are doing something wrong or are a flawed human being because something has stopped you that didn't stop somebody else. That's just, we're wired differently, just like these trees are. And also don't think that just because you've been stopped for a long time means that you will be stopped forever. From what I understand, this tree is going to try again next year. And hopefully next spring, or next winter, I guess I should say, hopefully we don't have a repeat of these same unusual circumstances that were not anybody's fault. They were just a thing that happened that stopped this tree from growing this year. I believe that this tree will come back strong next year. And I believe that's also something we can all do, even if we've been dormant for a long period of time. Second example involves grass. So in this story, I am a first-time homeowner, and it is mid-July during a very, very dry season in Minnesota, and our entire yard is brown. And I don't know much about how grass works at this phase of my life. And I just walked outside one day, and like 80% of my yard just looks dead. And my first thoughts were, okay, I'm an idiot. Everyone on this street except me knows how to take care of their yard. I've killed all of my grass. As soon as everyone comes out of their house, they're going to point and laugh and be like, look at this idiot, no grass guy. Ha ha, I'm the embarrassment of the neighborhood. Found out later that what actually happened is that the grass went dormant. The soil was too dry to support the grass continuing to grow. And grass has basically like a power saving mode built into it that when it doesn't have enough water to continue growing, it enters this dormancy period and it turns brown and it stops growing and it kind of looks dead, but it's actually not dead. And you can tell that it's not dead because if you go and try to pull some out of the ground, the roots are very clearly still rooted in the ground. And so the grass had entered this dormancy period where it did not die, but also did not grow. Essentially, the grass's life got put on pause for a while. And as soon as I was able to water the soil and kind of figure that out, it greens up and starts growing again. And so it was fine. It just had a period of time where it looked very not fine and was very concerning to see. So, two rules that I think we can learn from this. One is that we need resources to grow. And if you're in a phase of your life or a season of your life where it takes everything you have, all of your time, all of your energy, all of your attention, just to make ends meet, just to get through the day, just to survive, you're not going to be able to grow during that season of your life. And I want you to know, I don't say season dismissively. For some people, a season of life might be a month or 3 months. And I know some of you are probably in seasons of life that have lasted a decade or more. So I don't want to say that dismissively as if it's like, oh, it's just this short period of time that will be over soon. I don't know what the future holds for you, but I do know, because I have seen it happen, that people, just like grass, can awaken from these periods of dormancy when they have enough resources to actually grow beyond just making ends meet and getting through the day. So if you've been stuck, frozen, or on pause for a very long period of time, it does not mean it's over for you. It does not mean you've peaked. It also doesn't necessarily mean that you're doing something wrong or screwing your life up. It most likely just means that you don't have a surplus of resources. And I think a lot of us would probably say that is the case. The other lesson that I have taken from this is that trauma can prematurely end a growing season that was otherwise going well. And this trauma may not be apparent to others around you. So people might not always get it, right? People might not know or understand what you've been through because they can't see beneath the surface in your life. They can't see physiologically what happened to halt this growing period for you. When we receive a shock to our systems, it can stop us dead in our tracks. It can prematurely end or debilitate an entire season of life. But just as with these dormancy periods, there will be a chance for you to grow again down the road. I cannot say when that will be, of course, because I do not know the future of your life. But the circumstances that ended your last growing season will not last forever. And so as long as you don't give up, and as long as you're willing to keep trying, you've still got a shot at this. I hope that you can take these lessons from the trees and from the grass that don't have brains and don't have nervous systems and can't be stupid or weak or misguided because they literally don't have the capability to do those things. And apply what we've talked about here to yourself. Because if these things can happen to organisms that literally cannot make a mistake because they don't have free will and conscious choice, then surely those things can also happen to us. And I believe that some, perhaps even many, of the walls that we hit in life are not because we're stupid, horrible screw ups, but because either we experienced trauma that ended the growing season for us, or we simply do not have enough resources to get out of dormancy right now. And both of those problems can be temporary and can be acute. Often it is the shame and the guilt and the judgment that we heap upon ourselves. And, we sometimes get some help from other people in that department too. But for most of us, the majority of it probably does come from within. That just piles on more and more and actually prolongs this period of dormancy because it reduces our available resources because we have to spend so much resources fighting all these negative thoughts in our head. And that's really not the most important battle for you to be fighting because we don't even need to be doing that. If you could just be gentler with yourself and be more patient with yourself, you wouldn't have to expend so many resources on your inner bully. You might be able to use some of it for actual growth. So I really hope you can put these lessons into your life, and I hope they helped you as much as they've helped me. Take care, and I will see you next time.